This is one of the harshest and most desolate places on Earth. Kholat Syakhl, deep in the northern Ural Mountains, where icy winds dominate, known by locals as the Mountain of the Dead. The year is 1959. In the Soviet Union, under the tension of the Cold War, 9 skilled mountaineers began a journey they would never complete. What they left behind were not only frozen bodies, but a haunting mystery that remained unsolved for over 6 decades, inspiring countless theories, films, and books. Their tent had been sliced open from the inside, as if they were escaping something from within. In temperatures below -30 degrees, in the darkness of night, they abandoned all their gear and fled the campsite. Some were barely dressed, others stepped into the snow wearing only socks. Even more disturbing were the injuries found on their bodies. Some had trauma comparable to high-speed collisions. Yet there were no signs of struggle, no evidence of animal attacks. With no clear explanation, Soviet investigators closed the case with a single phrase: an unknown, compelling force. So what truly happened on that mountainside that night? After decades of speculation, modern science has finally brought clarity, using 19th-century mechanical principles, advanced simulations, and the detailed work of Swiss researchers. The answer was not something supernatural, but something far more real: the deadly physics of snow and wind. The story begins with a group led by a talented 23-year-old engineering student, Igor Dyatlov. The team, made up of 7 men and 2 women from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, were far from amateurs. Among them was a sports instructor and World War II veteran. These were people experienced in surviving extreme winter conditions. Their objective was Mount Otorten, one of the most remote and difficult peaks to reach at the time. They set out on January 23, 1959. Their final photos and journal entries showed high spirits, a sense of adventure despite the brutal environment. But on the night of February 1st, everything changed. The group drifted slightly off their intended route and decided to camp on the slope of Kholat Syakhl. It was an exposed, wind-swept area above the tree line, close to the summit. They carved into the snow to create a level surface for their tent, had dinner, and settled into their sleeping bags. It was the last thing they would ever do. Weeks later, when rescue teams finally reached the site, what they discovered defied explanation. The tent was barely visible beneath the snow and had been cut open from the inside, slashed outward with a knife. This detail suggested immediate danger. So urgent they didn't even use the entrance. They escaped in panic. That panic was only the beginning. Footprints in the snow told a strange story. Some were barefoot, others showed only a single sock. They had left behind boots, clothing, and essential gear, running into the freezing darkness toward the forest. The first bodies were found beneath a cedar tree near the remains of a fire. But as the snow melted and searches continued for months, the situation became even more complex. The final 4 bodies, discovered in a ravine, changed everything. Autopsies revealed severe internal injuries, yet no visible external damage. No bruises, no cuts. It was as if immense pressure had crushed them from within. Some bodies also showed signs of prolonged exposure to the elements. The Soviet authorities quickly closed the investigation. Reports of low-level radiation on some clothing only deepened the mystery. For years, people questioned what could have forced such experienced hikers to flee in terror and suffer such injuries. Was it an avalanche? At the time, experts rejected the idea. The slope appeared too gentle. There had been no snowfall that night. And most importantly, there was a gap of around 9 hours between when they cut into the snow and when the disaster occurred. Then, 60 years later, 2 Swiss scientists revisited the case: Alexander Puzrin from ETH Zurich and Johan Gaume from EPFL in Lausanne. One, a geotechnical engineer, the other, a leading expert in avalanche simulation. They challenged the assumption that the slope was too flat. Snow-covered terrain can be deceptive, making inclines appear less steep than they are. In reality, the campsite was close to the critical 30-degree angle needed for avalanche formation, and the trench the hikers dug into the snow had weakened the slope. But the key question remained: why did it happen hours later? The answer was katabatic winds, powerful currents of cold air flowing downhill, carrying and depositing snow. According to their models, strong winds that night gradually accumulated snow above the tent. Hour by hour, the pressure built on a fragile layer beneath. Eventually, Sometime around midnight, it failed. But this was not a massive avalanche. It was something far subtler and more dangerous, a slab avalanche. A dense block of snow, about 5 meters long, roughly the size of an SUV, broke loose and collapsed onto the tent. Small in scale, but deadly. This also explained why no large avalanche traces were found. The slab was quickly buried and erased by fresh snowfall. So how could such a small slab cause such devastating injuries? Here, science turned to advanced simulations. Researchers adapted avalanche models to understand how snow impacts the human body. They also used data from 1970s automotive crash tests, which analyzed the forces experienced during collisions. The comparison was striking. Because the hikers had placed their skis beneath their sleeping area for insulation, the surface under them was rigid. When simulations were run, the results matched the injuries almost exactly. A heavy, compact slab of snow hitting people lying on a hard surface could cause severe internal trauma, especially to the chest and skull, without leaving obvious external wounds. Most avalanche victims die from suffocation. But these unique conditions explained why the Dyatlov group suffered such unusual injuries. So what likely happened that night? The reconstructed sequence is chilling. The group set up camp on the slope, unknowingly creating a dangerous instability. Throughout the night, katabatic winds increased the snow load above them. While they slept, the slab collapsed onto the tent. Some were seriously injured in the impact. The entrance was blocked. Breathing became difficult. In panic, driven by instinct, they cut their way out from inside. They didn't abandon the injured. They pulled them from the wreckage. But the tent was no longer usable. Their boots and warm clothing were trapped inside. In minus 30 degrees, during a storm, half-dressed, their only option was to head toward the forest. Nature showed no mercy. Near the tree line, they tried to light a fire, but hypothermia was already taking hold. Some died there. Others likely moved toward the ravine in search of shelter, but it wasn't enough. Expeditions in 2021 and later supported the Swiss researchers' conclusions. The region does present avalanche risks, and similar snow behavior can occur under the right conditions. These findings have dismissed most conspiracy theories and left the most realistic explanation. The Dyatlov Pass incident is no longer just a mystery. It is a tragic natural disaster. But that doesn't make it less powerful. In fact, it makes it more human. Because this was not the work of something unknown or supernatural. It was the story of 9 young people facing the raw force of nature. People who stayed together, who tried to save one another, who refused to leave the injured behind, and who held on until the very end. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy historical mysteries explained through science, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next discovery. Goodbye.